Life Camp USA is a nonprofit organization that mentors young men who have lost a father due to military or law enforcement service. Life Camp USA provides an all-expenses-paid, week-long, world-class camp experience that inspires, equips, and navigates these fatherless young men through some of life's toughest moments. Life Camp USA's mentors serve grieving families by helping these sons establish healthy identities, values, character, and goals without the crucial aid of a father in their life. To learn more about Life Camp's mission, visit lifecampusa.org. Again, that's lifecampusa.org.
Welcome to the No Regrets Leadership Podcast, where leaders are empowered to equip and disciple men.
Welcome to the No Regrets Leadership Podcast. My name is Steve Sonderman, and I'm going to be your host today. And just grateful for each one of you who are listening today. As you know, our goal every single week is to encourage and equip you as a leader of men. And so we realize that some of you are small group leaders, some of you are pastors, some are leading a ministry to men in the local church, you're planning an event, you're hosting the No Regrets Conference, and everything in between. And today we have as our special guest, Ricky Jenkins. And we're so excited to have Ricky with us. He's going to be at the conference this year as one of our keynote speakers. He's coming from Southwest Church in California, where he's been the pastor now for a number of years. And Ricky just has a real heart for men, for ministry to men. And so today we're going to give you a chance to hear a little bit of his heart, to hear a little bit of his history, some of the hopes he has for the conference and for the men of his church. So Ricky, thanks so much for being with us today.
Steve, I'm so honored just to be talking to you and to get to know you, but to also put the word out there as to what God's been doing in my life as I look forward to our No Regrets gathering. And I'm just excited. Thanks for having me.
You bet. You bet. So listen, why don't we, for the listeners that have never maybe heard you speak before, why don't you just tell them a little bit about yourself? Just tell them about maybe a little bit about how you came to Christ. If you want to tell us a little bit about your family, your ministry, and sort of how God has moved you along through the years.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Steve. Yeah. Well, so me and April, my wife, and our three kids, 9, 7, and 5. So 2 boys and a girl. I don't play favorites, Steve. I love all of my children equally, but if the house catches on fire, I'm getting that girl out first.
Yeah,
and that's a little bit about our family. We've been in Indian Wells, California for about 6 years, but I actually grew up as a Southerner. I'm a Southerner at heart and grew up in a town called Pearl, Mississippi. And so just kind of deep South, steeply religious tradition. I'm a 4th generation pastor, believe it or not. So my great granddad was a preacher, granddad's a preacher, dad's a preacher. All the dogs were preachers, and was blessed to kind of be immersed in a love of God, love of church. However, man, like all of us, right? I've got my own story of being in church a lot, but not a lot of church being in me. And when I was around 15, I really started to feel the conviction of the Spirit. Longing to have an authentic faith of my own. I knew all about God, but couldn't say that I really knew God for myself. And man, God was so gracious to pursue me. December 14th, 1992. I'm one of those who can remember when and where and what was going on when I accepted Jesus at 2:14 a.m. in the morning. I was one of those that God graced me with a dream about his return, and that I wasn't prepared for that return spiritually. And I woke up from that dream and said, you know what? I'm tired of running from God. And I gave him my heart and life. And I really aspire to encourage others with that gospel witness, to remind them that they don't have to run from God, that God loves them, that God's arms aren't folded against them, that God's for them. And if they put their trust and faith in Jesus, they can know him. So we've lived all over, Steve. Started as a youth minister in my 20s. My first church was in Oakland, California, or as a pastor at age 24. Ministered there for 7 years, jumped to Memphis, Tennessee to work with a mentor of mine named Brian Loritz. And I served in a great church there before jumping out to Chicago with my wife, April, to do some seminary training. Started on a doctorate up there as well. I may finish that doctorate before Jesus comes back. We'll see how that goes. And then came back to Memphis, Tennessee, before getting a call from a church in the middle of the Coachella Valley, a place I'd never heard of. And it's just been a wonderful joy to minister to the people of Indian Wells here at Southwest Church. And we love it. Gospel-centered, multi-ethnic, intergenerational church, and we love discipleship. So that's a little bit about me, but just love preaching the gospel, Steve, but love shepherding people more than I love preaching the gospel. So that's a little bit about me, man.
Yeah. Well, that's so helpful. And obviously a couple different stops there along the way, but I'm sure through all of it, God's been preparing you for what he has you doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
In your notes, you mentioned Acts 20:28 as a key verse for you. Tell listeners why that's an important verse to you.
Sure. Well, so just to give you a bit of context here at Southwest as to why that verse is such a big deal. Here, when you come onto the elder team, we give you a sword. So it's engraved with that inscription, Acts 20:28, which says, "Pay careful attention to yourselves and to the flock of which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers." Steve, Acts 20 captures this moment where the Apostle Paul is leaving the church at Ephesus for the very last time. He's literally about to get on a ship, and they know they are not going to see him again. And these were the last words that the Apostle Paul gave to men to go and shepherd and lead the ministry in his absence. And I love the rhythm of it. Pay careful attention to yourselves. In other words, we've got a responsibility to make sure that we have a faith of our own, a spiritual health and vitality of our own. And I liken that, Steve, to what happens when we sit on the plane and they go through all of the instructions and they say, hey, if turbulence happens and the gas masks come down, don't help the person who's next to you first. First, put the air on you so you now have the capacity to help others. And I always see Acts 20:28 that way. That I have a responsibility to pursue my own health, my own wellness in Christ first, to be able to help others in an effective way. And I think Acts 20:28 really captures that. And I love what happens thereafter. It's a wonderful scene where Paul is leaving the church for the last time. The Bible says that the elders there, that they leapt upon Paul with tears and they kissed him. And I'm even moved now, and I've talked about this verse 1,000 times. He pastored those guys so well. He loved them so well. He served them so faithfully that they were weeping because they knew they were going to miss their shepherd. And for me, this crystallizes what ministry is. You and I, brother, ought to love the people that God has entrusted us so well that when God does call us to the next assignment, that they are not thrilled. Thank God that guy's out of here. But they're not worried either because they've been equipped to go on and continue the ministry. And Acts 20:28 captures that crystal clearly for me, for our elders here at our church, for our leaders, for our staff pastors, and for the guys who are listening right now. I think that's a great litmus test of sound biblical leadership, that when we leave this assignment, the men that we've been entrusted to, they will be sad that we're leaving because we shepherded them so faithfully, but they won't be worried that we're leaving because we have equipped them so excellently. So that's a big kind of junk drawer of what's all going behind Acts 20:28 for me, man. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your sharing that because I just love that whole passage, and all that he says in there about self-leadership and shepherding the flock and the word of God and being a gospel-centered person. I mean, it's just loaded.
That's right.
I would encourage anyone listening, if you're looking for a great study, first we're in a group, is to just take that whole passage of Paul's address to those leaders and just spend some time with it because it's so rich.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's change focus here a little bit. You're coming to the conference here in February. Make sure you bring a coat. It will be a little colder than Southern Cal.
Got it.
But I know that you've spent time over the years speaking at various men's events around the country. What gets you excited about speaking to men?
Oh, wow. So many things, Steve. So me and April, now that, we're busy, are starting to learn how to select those extracurricular or itinerant ministry opportunities that not only benefit the kingdom, but benefit my soul. And so in many ways, I'm being a little selfish. I know coming to be a part of No Regrets is going to build up God's kingdom. We're going to have such a good time with the men, but it also benefits my soul. And so we've kind of learned a discipline whereby Ricky only does the stuff that, yes, I can give, but our family can receive. And one of the reasons we love doing stuff for men is that there are few experiences in ministry that energize me, that fuel me, that excite me more than being with men. First reasons first is because I am a man. I'm a dude. So I'm a dude with dude problems and dude strengths and dude weaknesses. And there is nothing. Psalm 133, behold how sweet and how pleasant it is when brethren dwell together in unity. Steve, I'm just convinced there's something that happens when men come together in solidarity that don't hear me saying that it can't happen with a room full of women and a room full of students or whatever the case may be. But I think God honors men when we get on the same page and get together. I think the worship fuels us in a nuanced way. I think the power of the word fuels us in a nuanced way. So I just love the energy, what happens when a bunch of guys get together, but it's also the potential for the impact, right? I think the culture has largely feminized us. And we know that that's one of the kind of the designs of the enemy. And hear me say that women are important and equal at the foot of the cross. And we all know that because that's what the Bible teaches us. But there seems to be an unusual level of attack spiritually against men, which for me signifies that there should be an unusual level of focus upon you and I who minister to men. So just think about the potential for the impact. Statistics say, man, if a child is the first to become a Christ follower in their household, if a kid is first, there's a 3.5% probability that everybody else in the house will follow. If mama becomes the first person to give her life to Jesus, there's a 17% probability that everyone in the household will follow. If dad becomes the first Christ follower in the home, Steve, there's a 93% probability that everyone else in the house will follow. Husbands, dads, men are the change agents of the culture. So I'm just adamant by that if we can get some men on fire for Jesus, we can get a whole culture, a whole community, a whole county on fire for Jesus. And I pray that's going to happen when we come together in February.
Well, that is definitely our prayer. And that's what we've seen for the last 31 years. That's why I've been doing ministry to men full time for 35 years now, because I'm just convicted to the core of the change and the difference it can make. I'll let you know a little secret as far as being refreshed. Friday night, we and our listeners probably don't even know this, but Friday night we all go out as a speaking team because there'll be 6 or 8 of us from all over the country that'll come together. We go to dinner. We have a private room, and it's a chance to be refreshed. We just go around the table and share our stories. It's a chance for the speakers to get to know each other. And then we just get down and we pray together. And I will tell you, Ricky, for me, it's the best part of the weekend. I wouldn't even have to go on Saturday because my soul is refreshed during that time.
Sure. Wow.
And I'm glad that you'll be able to experience that so that there's some refreshing for you as well. From these other men that'll be gathered there, because once Saturday comes, we're just all over the building and we're all doing our thing, But Friday night we get to be together and to encourage each other, and
I love that.
It's a special time.
Absolutely, so excited for it.
So Ricky, let me ask you this: you're a senior pastor now. You've been at Southwest for 6 years.
Sure.
What does it look like for you? All right, as the senior pastor, to be the sort of the men's pastor. You're the pastor to the whole congregation, but what does ministry to men look like for you at Southwest?
Sure. Well, it starts organically before it happens organizationally. And so for me, I heard Chris Hodges tell me one time, Steve, that you're never going to have good ministry life if you don't have good family life. And you don't get to call people authentically to what you want them to do if you're not first doing it yourself. So me and April have a saying: God is first, then one another, then the children, and church is a distant fourth. And so that's literally something we say to ourselves to remind ourselves of our ultimate responsibilities. So here's my fifth responsibility. It's discipling men organically in and of my own life. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we're kind of looking at men's ministry here at Southwest. But I have a small group of 11 guys. We call ourselves the 12. Pattern after Jesus and the disciples. We are not technically in the small group system of Southwest. These are Ricky's guys that Ricky handpicked and prayed and fasted about. God, who do you want me to be discipling in this moment? They're over my house a few Sunday nights a month. We'll have personal retreats and service projects here and there. And I am discipling these guys. I've been walking with this same group for 3.5 years. I'll release them at some point so they can go and disciple their next generation of men. And out almost 30 years of serving Christ. This will be my sixth or seventh generation of disciples. And so before I ever even think about church, I'm making sure that in my personal life that I'm achieving the Great Commission. And I just think for the guys who are listening out there, it's hugely important because sometimes we siphon every ministry effort to what happens in a building. And last time I checked, my breakfast table is the most strategic space that I have to influence the gospel for generations to come.
Hey, church leaders, do you desire to teach your men how to impact their world for Christ in their own place and space? Then consider bringing Disciple Maker 101 Live directly to your church. Disciple Maker 101 Live covers the same material as our flagship 10-week online course, but in a condensed version. Steve Sonderman, founder of No Regrets, will come to your church and walk your men through this transformative course, while inspiring and equipping them to make disciples who make disciples. For more information, visit our website, noregretsmen.org, and book Disciple Maker 101 Live today.
Here at Southwest, our church is kind of reimagining men's ministry. We had healthy rhythms in the way of men's breakfast here, small groups there, events and conferences here, and then the pandemic happened. And we've just kind of had to completely rethink how we're going to amp up. One of the big time keynote speakers that's coming to No Regrets is a good friend of mine named Kenny Luck. So we partnered with Kenny and we said, you know what, let's rebuild this thing from top to bottom. And we can't do that without leadership. So for the last few months, Kenny has been coming in weekly just to build up our team of 8-9 guys, to love on us, to disciple us, to speak into what scalable, leverageable men's ministry looks like for a 3,500 member church, the likes of which God has given us. So we have Tuesday morning Bible studies, Tuesday night Bible studies that breaks off into small groups. And we're starting to think through how can we move away? You're always going to have the big events, but we're thinking we want more impactful experiences for men. In the way that culture's feminized itself and the way that church tends to lend towards the more feminine perspective, right? Even with the songs we sing, men are made to wake up and kill something or climb something or fix something. And I'm not sure that the Sunday morning experience does that in the way that we need it to awaken the hearts of men. Right. So we're starting to think through, okay, I can get 300 guys to this next men's retreat, but I can get 30 guys who may want to go play a round of golf with me and hang out in the cabin for a day and a half and actually get to know every last one of them, and every last one of them get to know me and have a meaningful experience. Steve, my point is this: the more men I talk to today, the more lonely I realize that men are. And I think it's never been a better time for men's ministry to offer community and acceptance and fellowship to the heart of a man. I always tell men the same thing. Good men always accomplish the first 2 rails, but very rarely do they accomplish the third rail. The first rail is a good wife and a good family system. The second rail is a good career and I'm contributing to society. The average man usually stops there and doesn't have a good friend. And by good friend, I mean someone who's godly, who loves Jesus, who's holding you accountable, who's challenging you in your life. So when you talk about men's ministry at Southwest, we're trying to think through how do we offer that third rail where we can get a guy immersed in deep and meaningful relationships right now, regardless of the fact of whether or not we pack out a breakfast. I'd rather have 30 more guys in relationship with other godly guys than 300 men at a conference that I'm not sure what happened with them or not. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And if you look at the news, you look at the articles, loneliness is the number one mental illness or illness facing people today in our country. And you see it especially among men.
That's right.
And so getting them connected in a deeper relationship is so vital.
Absolutely.
Ricky, I love what you said about you have your loving guys and you're spending time together a couple Sunday nights a month. You're investing in each other. It's I'm sure it's very mutual edifying for you and the guys. What would you say to a senior pastor who is out there and saying, you know what, I've got too much to do for that. I got to write sermons. I got to go visit people in the hospital. I've got to do my counseling. I've got to do this. I got to do that. And I just don't have time for that hands-on type of ministry. What are the benefits? What is the apologetic? What would you say to that guy that just says, you know, it's for someone else to do?
Well, I'd say a few things to him, Steve. The first thing I'd say is, dear pastor, dear men's ministry leader, God bless you. Thank you for what you're doing, because you've already signed up for warfare. You're already the kind of person who's unusually excited to build into people. So the first thing I want to say to that guy is thank you. The second thing I want to say is, but how's that working out? and I would just say that I was the guy, Steve, who was in Oakland, California, and Memphis, Tennessee, and Chicago, Illinois, doing all the things: hospitals, baby dedications, funerals, weddings, trying to keep up with this Bible study, getting a sermon ready for Sunday. And it is good and it was fruitful, don't get me wrong. But when I read the Gospels, I do not see Jesus approaching the ministry by and large the way we approach it in the Western experiment of how pastors lead and how men ministry lead. Hear me, we don't need to throw the baby without the bath and the bath without the bath, you know, the expression as well. But if we could learn, or if we would be willing to just try God at what his word says and to be more qualitative than we are quantitative, I don't know. I think there's some exponential fruit on the other side. And so what I've been experimenting the last 4 or 5 years is to spend less time with the program and way more time with the programmers. Jesus would be with the crowd, Steve, and would sometimes intentionally be confusing. Like there's some passages where Jesus is giving this parable, and it was so confusing that even the disciples says, we have no clue what you just said. Explain that to us. And I would watch Jesus forsake the quantity of people who were hearing and would opt for the quality of what was being heard with the disciples and invest his energy with the 12 more than he did, if you will, the 1,200. Yeah. Jesus understood that I got 3 years to get this message qualitatively into the hearts of these few that God has entrusted to me. And I'm going to trust that they'll be able to scale for the world. And so I think sometimes we try to add instead of multiply. And so what we're doing here, that's why I have a small group, you know. I've been in my small group for 3.5 years now. We've already sent off to date 2 guys who have already started new groups, right? One of my guys I just sent off, he, you know, the rhythm is when we send you off, you come one last meeting to the 12 and you bring, like my buddy Josh Van Gorp just brought his 4 or 5 guys. We bless them. We said, this is what to do. This is what not to do. This is best practices. And we laid hands on these 5 men and we sent them off to go make disciples in their own right. And so that's the message of the gospel. So I want to encourage the guy that's out there listening that quality is better than quantity. And it may mean that some people are going to say, what are you doing? When's this event coming? And what are you going to do about all those sorts of things? But man, give the gospel and the method of disciple making 2 or 3 years of your sacrifice. And my point is this: I'm about to unleash 11 junior Rickies for good, bad, or ugly in the next 6 months. And I think those guys are going to do way more with the gospel than what I would have done with my time had I been going to the traditional touch points that we always provide. i.e. this event, that conference, and you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So I just want to tell the guy that's out there listening, the method of Jesus is the method that we need to work ourselves tirelessly to get back to. And I think it's a sacrifice, right? But I think on the other side of that is some abundant fruit.
Yeah, it's a sacrifice, and it's also countercultural. If you're sort of obsessed, you're thinking about numbers and filling the pews.
Yeah.
You're thinking, well, I got to get my energy on that.
That's
and
right.
Really, like you said, taking God at his word that this will actually do that through multiplication.
Absolutely.
Absolutely beautiful. I came to Christ back in the early 70s. And the guy that led me to Christ gave me Robert Coleman's book, The Master Plan of Evangelism.
Sure.
And it's, it's a classic. And it was the first book I ever read as a Christian. And and I was like, and he said, this is what it's about, and I didn't know any better. I just thought, okay, this is what everyone does. So here you go, just get us a group of people, whether it was students or men or college students or whoever, different groups I worked with, and away you go. And it has proven that. And really, we're here today because Jesus' method works, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
2,000 plus years later, we're
well
here.
said.
It works. And okay, let's just get highly practical just to finish up.
Sure.
You're investing in these guys. What does that look like? You said, a couple times a month on a Sunday night. Give these listeners just a little, view into what that looks like as far as things you've done over the last 3.5 years with them.
Well, Steve, I started to kind of question, the way we approach programming in our typical men's ministry setting. And again, I don't think there's nothing wrong with anything that we're doing. I just don't know how much effectivity that we have in the things that we're doing. And I just started to be introspective and say, you know what? I'm not a perfect guy. I'm not Tim Tebow, right? but I figured out how to love a woman, how to raise up kids. I can get better at both, but I think my wife would say this dude's doing a fairly decent job. I think my kids would say the same. I think my church would say the same. And I started to just think, Steve, where did I actually learn that? Like, where did it actually happen? And then, Steve, I just started to think about all of the afternoons that I spent at my grandfather's side while he would take me to go on his hospital runs to visit sick and shut in. And I thought about how Brian Laritz, when I was a 30-year-old, and he invites me to Memphis to become a pastoral resident, how he refused to allow me to rent my own apartment like a grown man and says, no, you're actually going to live with me for about 7-8 months. Just watch me and my patterns with my wife and watch how I'm shepherding my boys. And I started to realize that most of what I learned about being a godly man didn't happen in a building. It happened in a home. And so a lot of the things I'm doing with my dear brothers, I call them my dear brothers, is opening up my life to them. Right? Am I teaching them lessons? Of course. We're walking through Ephesians right now. We walk through Romans. We walk through, marriage and tithing and stewardship. And we've even talked about how to die, to make sure a man is prepared to die. So we're doing the lessons. But Steve, I'm telling you, the secret sauce has been these guys get to come to my backyard around my fire pit and have a safe place to be in my home and love and learn each other. And so that's been the secret sauce for us. Essentially what is happening is that there's three pieces: education, experience, and exposure. The education is obviously just the teaching of the word. We all get that. The experience is, unique experiences that we're creating together. So we do a retreat every year where we go away and we do devotions together and pray and we eat and we have golf or whatever. We'll pick a charity and all of us will sign up and we'll go serve together or we'll go evangelize together. So unique experiences that bond us together. But the whole idea is that we've heard this till we're blue in the face. Discipleship is not just taught, it is caught. And so we create those experiences where they can have that. And then exposure. And that's just me realizing that they don't need 100% Ricky. They need to see a diversity of voices and backgrounds and heritages bring the gospel to bear upon their souls. And so every now and then I'll have the older guy at the church who can tell them things that I don't have the credibility for. Every now and then I'll try to find the rich guy at the church who can talk about stewardship and finances and business and leadership. I'll even have the guy, in fact, Chris Brown, who's been a speaker at No Regrets, has come just to share his wisdom. And so that's me just trying to expose them to other expressions of the gospel. And so those are the 3 X's: exposure, experience, education, that I try to bring on my guys. So far, so good. There's definitely some things we can do better, but man, sharing my life with them has been huge. So,
oh, Ricky, that is so helpful. It's very practical, and yet I love what you said about you open up your life to them. And I think a lot of us sometimes are afraid of that. They might not accept me for if they really know who I am. And so we sort of stay on the pedestal a little bit, or we hide a little. We're all good at hiding.
That's right.
That open life is so important.
Yes.
Listen, this has gone so fast. I can't believe it that we're out of time already, but this has been so helpful. Ricky, I can't tell you, I really appreciate your sharing these, just what you're doing and how it is organic in your life, and you're not just talking about it, but doing it. If the guys want to listen more to you, they want to follow you or learn more about you, where do they go? How can they do that?
Yeah, well, I would encourage guys, sermons are archived on southwestchurch.com if you ever want to hear me preach. And obviously on social media at Ricky Jenkins, RICKYJENKINS. But then if you want to hear a word of devotion, and if you don't have that resource, we do a devotion called Hope4Today. And so every day at 7 a.m. when you sign up, you text SWConnect to 94000. And that brings you into, you'll get a text message on your phone every morning that'll link you directly to a 3-4 minute morning Devo that I do every day. And a few thousand folks get that every day. And it's just been a sweet way for me to stay connected with all of our people. And so if you're a guy out there that just wants somebody telling you, hey, go get them today, and I'm praying for you, and here's a little truth about a Bible verse, you can try out Hope4Today.
Okay, that sounds great. So we'll put all that information in our show notes. We'll make it available to the guys. So guys, don't worry, you don't have to write it all down right now. It'll be right there in the notes, and you can go and you can sign up for the Hope4Today. You can listen to sermons, all the different things in preparation for the conference, and then after the conference as well. So Ricky, thanks again. Really appreciate you. Appreciate your opening up your heart to the guys today. And for those of you who are listening, I hope you've been encouraged, and make sure you share it with your leaders. All right. Pass it on to your small group leaders at your church, to your men's ministry team. And I know that they're going to find this very, very encouraging. So on behalf of Ricky and myself, thanks for listening, guys, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for joining the No Regrets Leadership Podcast. For more information and to access past recordings, please visit www.noregretsmen.org/podcast.
MK Cellular, your local U.S. Cellular authorized agent, is a proud supporter of No Regrets Men's Ministry. Find our locations at mkcellular.com.